The list of struggles faced by educators continues to grow as the teacher shortage impacts New York school districts. How are they navigating the shortage as a new academic year gets underway? Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I am Solomon Syed in Albany. Well, with the start of that new school year, a new list of challenges facing students, teachers, and administrators. A teacher shortage, just one of several issues as classrooms essentially return to a pre-COVID normal in terms of health and safety protocols. The ongoing national teacher shortage now impacting New York. According to state data, enrollment in teacher programs has declined 53% since 2009. And that's now causing an increased demand for teachers. Some districts now reporting increased threats to schools. And the effects of the pandemic on education have only hindered efforts to recruit more educators.
Not only does a teacher worry about or have anxiety or stress about the regular job of teaching, but then there's the violence that they have to concern themselves with and preparing for that. And are there appropriate levels of staffing?
And we're pleased to be joined right now by David Little, the executive director of the state's Rural Schools Association. David, rural districts facing many of the same issues as urban and suburban districts. We'll talk about some of the differences in a moment, but in terms of a teacher shortage, how significant of a challenge is that for those rural districts that you represent?
Solomon, it's been dramatic. Rural districts have all of the issues that public education as a whole has, in that there are fewer teachers in the pipeline. There have been a significant number of retirements, teachers that have decided coming out of COVID or during COVID that it was a good time to step away. We've had tremendous difficulty trying to find teachers in certain subjects like special ed and secondary math, but it's a generalized problem in rural areas, most specifically because they don't have the financial resources to compete with urban and suburban districts. I just saw this morning that Syracuse filled 300 teaching positions, largely by offering $50,000 bonuses to retired teachers to come back. Well, obviously, rural districts that have struggled even to provide the minimum required state-mandated curriculum in the past, they don't have $50,000 bonuses to give out to teachers. There are also systemic issues in rural areas. People are living in their homes far longer than they used to, and so there simply isn't housing for teachers who want to come in and begin teaching in a rural area. And a new teacher that has student loans and a lower starting salary certainly can't afford to build a house. So it's problematic.
You've touched on several components here. The financial component, many urban districts, like you said, offering higher salaries to offset the cost of living, even bonuses, as you cited there. Housing issues. How do rural districts start to compete for that teaching talent moving forward?
Well, you hear strategies from various areas, and some of them are pretty creative. The most prevalent is called Grow Your Own, which is grooming your own students to be able to come back and teach in the district. Most students want to return to their home community at some point in their lives, and a teaching profession within their community may be attractive as long as you've prepared them to think about that and to do that. So growing your own is one strategy, certainly. And beyond that, other states have been more creative. Their equivalent of BOCES builds housing, low-income housing for starting staff. Others have built dormitories, apartments for their starting staff, those types of things. We may still be a ways away before urban districts can raise their pay scale or provide bonuses to be able to entice people to come. The states of Missouri and Montana have a 4-day school week. Somebody who lives outside of the community and has to commute a great distance into the community may be more willing to do that if they only have to do it 4 days a week, and combine that with remote instruction. So there are strategies, but the fact of the matter is, if we don't have enough teachers generally, historically rural districts will be the last to get those teachers.
Now, David, you talk about what some other states are doing. We also see a few states trying to encourage people to leave other professions where they may have professional expertise to come back and teach. Is that something that the state education department should consider here on a maybe to give an advantage to rural districts? You maybe don't have that teaching degree, but you might have a level of expertise in an area, maybe encouraging them to come back and teach as opposed to staying in that profession.
It is an irony, that old Mr. Little, who's been teaching business in a district for 30 years, can teach despite never having had any business experience. But Bill Gates or Warren Buffett can't teach in the New York public schools because they don't have the required teaching credentials. So I think the state education department has recently, over the last year or so, become much more willing, much more amenable to trying to talk about allowing credentialing from other states to count in New York, to allow a broader breadth of curriculum to be included within a teacher's license, so that we don't have this situation where so many districts are literally out of compliance because their teachers are not certified in the subject matter they're teaching in, because they simply can't find teachers that are certified in the subject matter.
David, let's move past the question of the teacher shortage and get to some of the other issues facing rural districts. What are you hearing from the districts that you represent in terms of the upcoming school year? We know that the CDC guidance and the state guidance on COVID has changed, a whole host of other issues, including safety. What are you hearing from your members?
Solomon, we're in a really unique period of time right now. There are things that are really promising. Going back to what we know is the traditional setting in school, where we don't have to socially distance, we don't have to wear masks, students don't have to test to return to class. All of those things make things more normal. And so starting school has been easier because of those things. We also have a financial circumstance where both the state and the federal government have made significant investments in schools of late. And so some of the traditional fiscal crises that rural schools seem to perennially be in has been decreased over this year, and we anticipate for the next couple of years. So those things are very promising. But at the same time, you have 3 years of learning loss and mental health issues. I like to say that since I grew up in a suburban setting, if I had gone through the pandemic as a child at my home as a child, I would have done my work over the internet, and then I would have gone out to play socially distanced from my friends. And so my isolation would not be severe. For rural children, they've in essence been in solitary confinement for a number of years. And so you're seeing fairly significant mental health issues and developmental retardation. We're seeing, say, freshmen in high school that are coming in with the emotional development and the mindset of a 7th grader because they never went to middle school. They're going straight from elementary school into the high school. And so trying to help them adjust, trying to move them forward to get them back on track is a significant challenge, particularly in rural districts.
Oh, a whole host of challenges that not only rural districts are facing, but statewide districts seeing it as well. David Little, we really appreciate your time and your insight today. Thank you so much.
Very welcome, Solomon. Thanks.
The debate over the impact of the HALT Act continues in New York. Statistics showing injuries to corrections officers are on the rise, but why supporters say the law is leading to better conditions inside prisons. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm Solomon Syed in Albany. Well, the back and forth over the HALT Act, which limits the use of solitary confinement in New York's prisons, continues. Corrections officers spent the past week rallying in different regions of the state, trying to bring awareness to a reported rise in assaults on prison staff since HALT was implemented. Part of that, including joining us here on Empire State Weekly to address numbers provided by the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, which shows a nearly 50% increase in the number of injuries to staff members from April 1st through the end of July as compared to that same time period last year. However, the Halt Solitary campaign releasing data that they say shows over 45% of people in segregated confinement have been locked illegally in solitary for more than 15 consecutive days. That would violate the HALT Act. The president of the union representing corrections officers who joined us recently on Empire State Weekly saying HALT is the reason for those worsening conditions in prisons.
HALT has surely enhanced the violence in our correctional facilities all throughout the state of New York without question. And it's based on much of the legislation that was enacted.
And we're pleased to be joined right now by Jerome Wright. He is the organizer of the Halt Solitary campaign statewide. Jerome, thank you so much for joining us. You have a unique perspective on this. You yourself were placed in solitary confinement.
Yes, I was on several occasions and cumulatively about 8+ years in solitary confinement during my incarceration, yes.
Now, Jerome, after that experience, why did you feel it was so important to lend your voice to limiting the use of solitary confinement in New York?
Because during that experience, my entire life and the lives of many of the men that I've come across who were doing that while I was in and continue to do that have been irreparably harmed. I can't even be left alone with the kids overnight because I have found a way to turn off my sound because of the total noise, the cacophonous sounds that's all day and half the night when you're in solitary. So they don't leave me with the kids overnight because if I go to sleep, I'll never hear them when they get up and start their little mischief. That is just a brief, thing that happened to me. But physically, emotionally, psychologically, it is torture. And there's no other way to put that.
Jerome, it sounds like you're still dealing with some of the impacts from your experience to this day. Can you speak a little bit more about maybe what you deal with, in your opinion, as a result from being in solitary?
Well, some things that you know yourself and some things other people have to point out to you. What things that I find normal in my life are people who let me know when I'm going off the rails. Like sometimes I shut down and I don't want to be around a bunch of people. After serving that type of time and being tortured and traumatized in that way, it makes you less likely to want to be around groups of people because you found a comfortable place and you had to find that place in there, and that's the place you go to. When I should be reaching out when I have problems, I don't, because when I was in there and I had problems, there was nobody to reach out to. So you sometimes delude yourself into believing that you're the master of your own destiny and you can solve your own problems. And that never leads anywhere good for me. Intimacy, even with my family, has strained because, the anxiety that sometimes befalls me at any moment, causes rifts and disconnection. And I'm just one person, and I had the benefit of having families and friends in my life. Many of my peers had nobody.
Jerome, you led the effort to get HALT passed. It took effect in April. Let's talk a little bit about the legislation. Your group conducted an analysis based on the latest DOCS numbers, and this week you are saying that 46.5% of people in solitary are being kept beyond the prescribed 15-day limit under HALT. How did you find these numbers, and what is your interpretation of what's happening?
Well, these numbers were provided by the Department of Corrections. The docs provided these numbers. There's several articles out. The Times, there's been research on this. There's no mistaking that they have not been following the law. I will admit, though, there have been some tangible results. Like, it's totally eviscerated the most oppressive form of lock-in, which is keep locked. They don't do that anymore. But you have hundreds of people still in solitary. And the law says that they should not be there beyond 15 days. And if they are, there are prescribed ways that you handle that. And none of that is being comported with. If I break a law, I get consequences. They're breaking the law, and what's their consequence?
Now, Jerome, on the flip side, NYSCOPO, which is the union that represents corrections officers, they're looking at DOC's numbers, and they're saying, based on their interpretation, that the number of injuries against staff since HALT has been passed has gone up almost 50%. I believe the number is 47.7%. How do you respond to their claims that HALT is resulting in more injuries to staff?
Well, first of all, I will say that this. First of all, they said there was no solitary confinement. They've said this for entire 12 years we fought this battle. And now they're conceding that there is, but they're not holding people beyond 15 days. I don't know which lie to take. I mean, the numbers don't lie. They put these numbers out. These people are in solitary confinement. What are we debating here, really? We're debating the fact that they do not want to implement it fully, and they're not following the law. That is it in a nutshell. We can go back and forth about, little, incidences that they can talk about. But what about the fact that they're blaming Hall on everything when they just took people's packages? What about when they've just taken people's visits? What about when they've restricted the type of material that can come in, reading material, and ways you can get the ways you can be accessible to amenities that you need on a daily basis? Prices have gone up. The frustration in behind those walls, and I speak to people almost on a daily basis, has nothing to do with HALT and everything to do with the way the Department of Correction continues to dehumanize and mistreat the people in their care.
Jerome, we have time for...
You take stuff from people, like packages. Some people, that's the only way they eat. They don't eat out of the mess hall because the food is dietarily terrible. So they find ways to get foodstuffs from home, and they stop that. You think violence won't go up when you don't have, the only way you can eat is through their means? Do you think when you take people's packages and they don't have the ability to get the stuff that they need, that they're not going to be angry? Let's stop putting everything on HALT, just like they try to put everything on bail reform. It is not HALT. It is the management of the Department of Corrections, and that's what it is. That's what it is.
Well, Jerome, this is an issue that we will continue to follow here on Empire State Weekly. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate this.
All right, well, changes are coming to New York's coronavirus response. Coming up, we are going to examine the new booster shot and what it's designed to fight. This as the governor relaxes one of the longest running pandemic safety measures. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm Solomon Syed in Albany. Governor Kathy Hochul now urging New Yorkers to get boosted with the latest vaccine targeting the Omicron variant. Jamie DeLine has the latest details, including what's changing on public transportation.
At her press conference on Wednesday, Governor Kathy Hochul rolled up her sleeve to get the latest COVID booster shot.
These boosters that we'll be talking about today and now be widely available today are to target the Omicron variants BA4 and BA5, which has been the predominant variants for a number of months now.
New York State Health Commissioner Dr. Mary Bassett encouraging New Yorkers who already had their first and second dose to get the new booster.
It doesn't matter how many boosters you've had before. If it's been 2 months since your last shot, you should look into getting another booster. For the 12 to 17-year-olds, it's the Pfizer, and for anyone 18 and over, either the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines are available as boosters.
And for the first time in 28 months, the governor also updating masking guidance on public transit.
Masks are encouraged but optional. This is what you're going to see on our subways and our mass transit throughout the state of New York. This is buses upstate, this is transportation everywhere. So we're very, very excited about that as well.
For those who work at CDTA, a bus service in the capital region, this is welcome news.
Because all this time, almost 3 years, they've had to wear a mask, for their entire shift on a bus, and it was difficult for them. So very welcome news for our employees. And I think as long as we do this, we make this change in a intelligent, thoughtful way, we're still going to encourage people to wear masks, but obviously it's their decision. We're not going to obviously mandate it any longer.
However, masks are still required in state-regulated healthcare facilities and clinical settings. Reporting in Albany, I'm Jamie DeLine.
Okay, stay with us. We're going to be back with a look at the week ahead, so stick around. And finally, here on Empire State Weekly, September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Advocates are pushing for more conversations around mental health, from the suicide rates of first responders to parents working to open dialogue with their kids. We will be following the ongoing efforts to raise awareness and what the state is doing to increase the availability of resources to those who need it. For now, from all of us here on Empire State Weekly, I'm Solomon Syed in Albany. We'll see you again next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across New York.